It's early, Huzzy, and I don't have to drive home. And I really like the doggy cam. It's cute. Happy gets weirded out when I just stare at her. But now she doesn't know I'm just staring at her. She's like, why are you staring at me? Come on. The doggy cam's cute. Right? Right? Can't believe you guys aren't as excited about the doggy cam as I am. The two best parts of my new setup. One, I am at the office and at home simultaneously, and that's incredibly convenient. So like basically, I don't have to leave the house ever. Um, that was actually part of the reason I had an office was to get myself out of the house. But now I also have Doggy Cam, and I have no idea why you people aren't as excited about the Doggy Cam as I am.
Hello, sir.
Yechezkel Spiro. I had to unmute myself first. How are you?
Fine. Yecheskel Shraga Halevi.
Shraga. Yechezkel Shraga. I never quite understood that name, Shraga.
Shraga
Means
means
fire, right?
fire, flame, yeah.
You are a flame.
Uh, I hope I'm not flaming, but yes, I'm
You're
a,
setting the world on fire.
um, you're, uh, you're really being persistent with these streams.
Well, kind of. I mean, now that it's at home, even if I'm doing something else, and frankly, with the doggy cam, come on, you gotta love the doggy cam.
I don't know. Most of the time, I thought he died, so I was like, "Oh no!" But now he's fine, thank God. Um, so
I have to set up this thing where if you pay $5, she gets a treat, so you can buy her a treat for $5.
feeding your dog, I feel like
Yeah, and
people will still get a kick out of that.
yeah, and you know, like internet feeder. Like, do you ever watch these animal cams on YouTube?
No,
See, I do. I love the baby. There was a baby giraffe cam. That's one of my favorites. And there's a
one
bear
second. I'm
cam
not.
in
Am I
Alaska
understand?
National Cam. What?
You're watching
You've never
animals?
heard of this? Yes.
Well, honestly, I prefer that over because I'm very against taking my kids to the zoo. I mean, I take them because like my wife makes me, but I guess it's healthier to watch them on a video cam than watching them in the zoo.
There's nothing wrong with a zoo. If you were an animal, you would prefer to live in a zoo than in the wild.
Well, I don't know about animals preferring things,
What do you
but
mean? No, excuse me. Do you prefer to live in a wild jungle or do you prefer to live in your house? Like animals,
yeah, but
if they're good zoos, like I'm not talking about tiny cages, but like Cincinnati Zoo has this. They have this hippo place for these
all right.
hippos, and like I love watching their hippos.
Um, so you could have an argument if there's like a lot of space for the animal to roam. Israel, as you mentioned earlier in the past, is 10 miles wide. So a zoo in Israel is extremely small. So seeing these lions and elephants in something that is a shoebox is just depressing to see.
Okay, I will agree with that. Israel is tiny. I've never been to a zoo in Israel, and they're probably tiny as well. And frankly, I mean, you could really easily just go to Kenya and see. But yeah, I am perfectly fine with zoos where they feed lions, turkeys that have been slaughtered, rather than making them hunt.
My son is very excited about. There's this initiative they're actually working on. I'm forgetting the name of the company, but they're bringing back. I think they want to bring back like 100 mammoths, and then they'll let them loose in somewhere in Siberia where they have like where they've created like this area
How do
for
you
the
bring back mammoths? They're
well
going to
they
genetically engineer them?
correct. They're taking an African elephant and I mean they're taking genes from mammoth that they found, and they're splicing it together. And then you're going to have basically a mammoth that's going to come out, which is X percentage African African elephant, and then another generation or two they'll have their mammoth again.
Yeah, I am not a huge fan of this, and I have to wonder what Caleb. Uh, oops, I wasn't using his name. Purple Flame. He's actually from. He has a PhD in biology, and he does research into this stuff. And he's not a huge fan of cloning. Last thing he said on the Discord server was your cloning guarantees sick human beings.
For now. This relates to the ChatGPT. Like, I think, like, it's inevitable where someone's gonna have a baby, and that's after they CRISPR'd him. They're still gonna make sure that they have the deluxe package where, like, a heart, lung, brains, eyes are all cloned already, waiting for him in case something happens. So, I don't know. A brave new world.
Yeah, I think you overestimate the capacities there.
I'm joining you back in a second. I just realized I'm missing key ingredients for my soup. So 1 second.
Okay. Yes, I did see Jurassic Park. And frankly, I think it's about as fictitious as the Jetsons. I mean, there are some of the things that the Jetsons had that we have these days, but there's plenty of things that the Jetsons had that we don't have these days. And that was, like, when was the Jetsons? They were in the 60s or 70s? Jetsons. The Jetsons is an American animated sitcom produced by Hanna-Barbera. It originally aired in prime time from September 23rd, 1962 to March 17th, 1963. New episodes were in 1985 to 1987. So, let's see if I can find an article that says, that compares to Jetsons technology compared to today. Okay, let's share this. So, 12 cool technologies. Chazi's back.
Yeah, so didn't you see Jurassic Park when they all take over the world?
I did, and I think Jurassic Park is as likely to come true as the Jetsons. That's why I was looking up Jetsons. Guess what? We don't have flying cars. Smartwatches, I guess we kind of do have smartwatches.
Did you read Archie growing up?
No, I did not.
So Archie had this segment called Riverdale 2000. And, robots, flying cars, the whole shebang. And then I think in, like, the 90s, they had to update it to, like, Riverdale 3000. They realized they were off by 1,000 years or something like that with the technology. But, yeah, we're not with the Jetsons yet. I'm with you. I was listening to your conversation with Jonathan. I actually, when I looked back, I saw I completely dominated the chat, but it's an interesting topic to me, so you'll have to excuse me. And
What'd you dominate? I don't remember you dominating the chat.
I don't know. I think I was like the only person writing over there, but it's all good. I'm not complaining, just saying. And I wasn't trying to. It's not that I want non-Jews to keep the Sabbath, and I also don't think if someone's not eager to do that, I don't think like that's the end goal that they should all do that. My point was that, and it also sort of relates to community and to Ger Tosha, that once this said Noahide finds himself as part of a community,
yeah.
And then in that community, they're like, you know what, we really want to be also doing more. Like, we want to be participating more. So in that case, they shouldn't necessarily feel like they can't do it. They can't do that. They can't participate. They can't participate in Shabbat. I don't think it's for necessarily even for every Noahide to do, because some of them might not want to do that, and some of them are not commanded to do so. However, it doesn't mean that they can't. That's all I was trying to say.
Well, I mean, I have a real question whether or not they can at all, and
Well, break that
That,
down for me because your question, I think, is coming from a place of for generations this has not happened. So for us
it's
right
not
now,
only that it didn't happen. By the way, who wrote Olat Tamid? I don't recognize that name.
I'm not hearing you, Jay.
Who wrote Olat Hatamid? I'm guessing Kazi got a phone call. In fact, I'm pretty sure Kazi got a phone call. "3D printed food." Yeah, that didn't happen.
Jacob, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What'd you ask?
Who wrote Olat Hatamid? I don't remember who wrote it. It sounds familiar.
Oh, it's I forget his name. I think it's a prominent rabbi from Poland in like the 1700s.
Okay, it's an
Yosef
Acharon.
something.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an Achron.
Okay.
So he wrote that. He wrote that as well. Yeah, but sorry, you were saying that's not the only reason is because it hasn't been done in generations.
It's not that it hasn't like lo matzinu eino raya, right? That's not the problem. And before I forget, I do want to know what you think of the idea of a ger toshav and the law of return. But we actively, I mean, this has basically been the halacha for thousands of years that until somebody converts, they're actually prohibited. And I told the story of my friend, like he genuinely would cry, right? It was sad to him that he had to light that match, right?
Mm-hmm.
But people did that, and like there's the famous story of the ger in Poland, and I'm sure you heard that. He was circumcised, but he didn't get to go to the mikvah before Shabbos, and that Shabbos he wanted to keep it, and there was a whole sturm, and like all kinds of things happened. It's not a pashut thing.
But I think these are all things that are intertwined and interconnected because this relates back to the dinim question that the Noahites have, which is I think, and we really couldn't do this for thousands of years. And like you mentioned in your stream, like I think it has to do with sort of the state of Israel, which is only when we're in a place where Israel itself can be recognized like as an entity, can we then allow for another group like the Noahites to be moved from individuals into sort of a group. And this connects to me saying like,
these are people who are converting, Chazi.
One second. First of all, I'm reading to you something right now that I'm not the only one that holds this. When Shirky holds this, you have the whole movement that works with specifically Noahites, and they go according to the Shita. The reason he believes this is that in the past, right, where there wasn't the state of Israel, and obviously because of this premise, you could deny it, which I understand.
Of course I do.
I understood. But his attitude is assuming it is the beginning of the redemption and blah, 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 blah. So he says there's a place for a government and a country to recognize this other group. And when we recognize this other group, okay, then, and by the way, this is also the differential, you have to realize the wording in the Rambam. There's a difference between a goy and a Noahite that decides to take these things on. And if a Noahite decides to take these things on through the understanding that this is coming also from Moses, then there are some people that hold that they could do so. Now, I think that as the movement grows, you might find more recognition in that shita. But I totally understand if it's not for everyone, and I wouldn't run telling people right now that's what everyone should be doing. However, there's place to grow, and this relates to your question about the law of return. Well, I think that's beautiful. I think that is something that needs that the Israeli government would consider, and the community in Israel would consider. But I think we're still a little premature. I think the movement itself needs to grow and needs to solidify, and then it's something that could be recognized. Because you do have already in Israel, Zera Israel is recognized at in a certain point from the government. But as far as law and return and the political and legal ramifications, I think that's going to happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, Noahide, who actually believes in Torah, right? As far as I'm concerned, he has more of a right to live in Eretz Yisrael than Mahal Shabbos like me.
I knew you were going to say that. Don't know. Definitely not. I don't think he has more of a right. They all have a right to be there. And they're all loved over there. However, yes, someone that is a Noahite that is keeping the Shabbos should be able to do so.
First of all...
Sorry, not keeping the Shabbos. I meant a Noahite that is keeping the commandments. Yes, yeah. He definitely should have a stake of claim in the land of Israel. No doubt.
Okay.
No doubt. That I agree with that. By the way, just as far as my, forget it. I won't go in there. But, so that was, that as far as that conversation, I was just noting that I wasn't just trying to push Jonathan to keep the Sabbath. I was just mentioning that these are options. And with regards to the Shituv question, which we've discussed in the past, obviously, I do think it's important to, what I was mentioning that the Zohar was saying is that, and this I don't want to sound demeaning when I say this, but like the attitude was that for many, many, many years, culturally speaking, many other religions and other cultures were playing around with polytheism and different versions of God. However, Judaism just doesn't, I don't think this is looking down at them. The attitude is that is just a lower version or a more immature version of a relationship with God. And Zohar mentions that the other nations were given heavenly conductors, or I don't know what
intermediaries.
Intermediaries, okay, exactly. And
yeah, this is actually the Sikha where the Rebbe he seems to be indicating that lechatchila a Gentile actually it makes sense for them to be involved in Shituf. And that's correct. So that was a surprising thing, and it made me rethink, like, he's not saying that it's mutar as in, okay, b'diavad, if they do, it's not a horrible thing. He seems to be saying it's mutar as a lechatchila dika thing, because
but that's the reality.
Neshama, I hear.
Well,
it's a difficult thing to talk about.
Put it into context of, usually this conversation is that back in the day, a long time ago, everyone, while there was, let's say, idol worship, it was still, and this has to do with why there were prophets, it was still, God's glory was in the world. So God's glory was so evident in the world where other nations clearly worshipped versions of gods because they felt the presence of a force. And that allowed for us to be prophecy and things like that. However, at that time, and the other world cultures, that was their experience with religion. So it really is sort of baked into their culture. And the attitude is that when you say like lechatchila, this isn't the default. That's their. One second, Jacob. I'm sorry, Amalia. You don't want Barney? We could put something else on.
How old is Amalia?
Amalia is my daughter. She's my youngest. She is a year and 7 months. And my wife right now is out with the kids shopping. And I'm watching her and making soup.
I see, said the blind.
So I think you don't want to sound demeaning when you say these things, though. It's
It's actually kind of funny. Sometimes I'm discussing things with Gentiles, and I'm like, I feel bad just saying such things, and then, like, especially sometimes Antonio's like, no, this makes perfect sense. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. Right. But hence, you could see there's a hunger for it, and that's why I think that it's also a natural progression, which is um, someone that was born, let's say, we'll call it a religiously, if their religious bloodline, okay, is via these
Their
the
heritage.
their heritage, if their religion heritage is built into this version like the Zohar sees it, then it sort of has to be a natural progression. And I mentioned this in the past that like Judaism was like waiting sort of 2,000 years for the world to sort of catch up in a certain extent, and now you have it. Now you have like a lot of this conversation where like we're clearly a lot more aligned. But this is what Rav Yehuda Leon Ashkenazi, Rav Mini 2, talks about us discovering, specifically with Christianity, the mysteries of Israel. Like we have to, together with them now, sort of dig back and look back in the past and try to understand who we are, who they are, and who we can be together. But that's obviously very much a brave space and very nerve-wracking. But I do believe that that's, in a certain extent, also what happens in this little corner. Which I
Yeah.
also to stress, I don't think you and I are evangelizing. Like I don't think the attitude is like we're trying to specifically target, Jews and non-Jews and try to have them turn into Noahites. Like at least it's not like my conscious mission.
Yeah.
I want to be in a space where this is happening.
My dad watched some of my videos, and he was very, very uncomfortable.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, my father, you have to remember from the background of like Iran, and my father is very much convinced that religion is something where it's completely illogical and it makes no sense, and like
Where's
my,
where's the man that was running in the desert and looked up to the moon and realized the moon was guiding him? Wasn't that like a religious moment for your dad?
yeah, but
Okay, so
that's the exception in my father's experience. My father still every once in a while congratulates me for breaking out of the OCD of being Shomer Torah mitzvahs.
congratulates you as in for being like not observant.
Yes, yes.
Okay, but I ask you, and this might be difficult for you, okay? But why, arguably, there is, you could come to your dad and be like, I'm doing these things. That doesn't mean you have to be wearing the black hat, the black suit. There's a modern version of doing this.
No, it's not a question. You think I was doing? I wasn't. I was doing things as modern as I could, while at the same time being trying to be halakhically observant. My parent and this was part of the crushing thing. No matter how much I tried, like my dad thinks religion is a mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
and he sees like washing your hands before like Nitilat Yadayim, he thinks of as a manifestation of being OCD.
Yeah, but all right. I mean, I'm not trying to argue with your dad, but like I feel like that predates people discussing OCD. So
Okay, well, first of all, my father is my father, and like so when my dad was he studied at Technion, and
he's a smart guy too.
he is a very smart guy. He went to Technion, and he
Technion
was,
is like Israel's MIT.
basically, yes, and he was there during the 1967 war, and my father was very much of the opinion that, like, religion, because of the advances that the Jewish people are making, religion was going to die out, and like we were going to be rid of all these crazy Haredim, and yeah, that didn't happen. And it was actually very surprising to me because I didn't know this stuff when I first started becoming religious. I thought I was following my father's footsteps because like I was learning Hebrew and I was, and my father, like in my family, he was basically, because he knows he knows Hebrew, he's kind of the rabbi, and like everybody thinks of him as like the very well learned like person. And when I started becoming religious, I was completely blindsided by my father's hatred for the Haredim.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand it. Like, when I was in Israel, when I was in yeshiva, and I've told this story a billion times, but you're going to hear it one more. Like, I remember my parents came to visit me, and my dad told me when we came to the United States, one of these schools, probably Chabad, offered him free tuition so he wouldn't put me in public school. And he told me he went to visit, and he saw all these kids running around with their yarmulke and tzitzis. And he said, even for free, this is not what I want my son to be like. And he was saying this to me while I was wearing yarmulke and tzitzis in yeshiva at Or Sameach.
Obviously, first of all, I'm sorry for that. That could be very, very challenging, which I'm sure it was, and very, very traumatic to sort of see literally your father and the psychological father figure and the figure that represents, in some sense, God to us as children, which is our father. So it's very difficult, obviously, to deal with that. And I'm sure that caught you, like you just said, off guard. But and you don't have to answer this right now. Like your current journey right now, and my context is like I am, as you know, very open-minded. So like I'm not running to telling people that they shouldn't be living a religious lifestyle because I think God loves all. However, in your where you are in your life right now, right? You have a channel where you're being very influential, relatively speaking, on different people, and you are preaching religion, you are preaching observance in a certain extent, and definitely for Noahites, you're talking to them about getting closer and taking on responsibilities and commitments to better and enrich their relationship with God. However, ironically, you are not living that life necessarily, and by not living that life, I'm sure you do a tremendous amount of good deeds and mitzvot, which are just built into the reality of how you live your life. So, like, by hook or by crook, you're still living a relatively religious lifestyle. But why not, quote unquote, commit?
Because my parents would lose their mind, my sister would lose her mind. Like, I honestly, I had a friend from a very similar background who we both went to yeshiva the same year in Israel, and he stayed in Israel, got married, and my parents were incredibly worried. They thought I was gonna do the same thing. I was gonna stay in Israel, and they would basically never see me again. And plenty of Baalei Tshuva, especially from families like mine, do precisely that. And maybe that is what I should have done. But for me, the idea that because I am religious, I'm going to only come visit my parents, as opposed to, so another story, and I've told it a billion times, but you're going to have to hear it again. Like, my sister lived on the 7th floor of a building that was at least 45 minutes walk from the nearest shul I could go to, or Shomer Shabbos family I could stay with, right? And she kept on inviting me to her house for Shabbos. And what does that mean? It means I have to arrive, so sometimes in the winter I have to arrive at 4. Her guests arrive around 8. right? And they make kiddush maybe by 9 o'clock, so I'm sitting there starving for 5 hours, right? And I have to daven alone, of course. And then I have to walk down 7 flights of stairs and wait for somebody to leave through the electronic doors so that I can leave the building. And then I have to walk an hour to stay with another family, right? So I said, I don't want to come. I can't. I made an excuse. I'm like, I can't come. The electronic doors. So my mom calls my rabbi, and my rabbi says, your mom wants you to be there, and halachically you have a chiyuv. So like, it was driving me crazy. It was literally driving me crazy. And like, imagine going on shidduchim and explaining to women, like, yeah, this is the life I lead. Like, when I go visit my parents, because my mom insists on not only trying to keep kosher, but calling the rabbi for every kula that's possible, and of course the rabbi is trying to be makel on her, like, and at the same, so I keep Yashan and I keep Chalav Israel and I keep, the highest levels of blot, and then when I go visit my mom, I keep every single kula in the world, and even so, it's not exactly kosher, right? And
that's beautiful.
It's crazy making. No, it's absolutely crazy making, and nobody wanted to marry into that. Would you want to marry into that?
No. So the two separate things. One, with regards to first of all, is anyone watching us? So I have to translate, or I don't have to translate?
Don't worry about translating.
So, I told you before the story of like me and my wife walking on the Sabbath, and then my brother telling me that I should carry her things.
Yes.
And the reason he did so is because there are our system allows and accommodates for change and for system switching, basically, where, like you just said, there's how you observe the Shabbat on the regular, and then there's when you're going to go see your mom, which has its own level of hierarchy, which is respecting one's parents. And then, yes, you could use the elevator on Shabbat. You could use the electric.
No. Excuse me. Okay, so use the elevator. First of all, at the same time, I was still trying to be frum, and like, I'm sorry, like,
let me take a step back. I'm sorry to cut you off. Let me take a step back. Forget right now. In 50 years from now, okay, and this is one of my big fears. This is a perfect example. In 50 years from now, I am fairly certain, maybe I'm wrong, I'm fairly certain that like elevators on the Shabbat, okay, are not going to be a thing anymore. Okay, it's just not going to be a thing. And then you have to wonder how many relationships were damaged because people felt that the way they view how religion is being kept or what the decree is completely limited their life, right? And then you find out like, oh wow, so. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
This is such a materialist way of looking at it, where God is not an agent in the world who sees things as they are, and just the fact that, for example, some people didn't eat turkey for a long time because they were being machmir, and now everybody eats turkey, doesn't mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't realize that those people who were being machmir, like, you have to recognize the fact that there is an agentic God, and Rahmana Libam Doresh, and it's not about these types of calculations that you make.
I obviously vehemently disagree. First of all, if you look at Maimonides, which I'm not saying this is my school of thought, I'm just saying, if you look at Maimonides, the agentic God, it's basically 90% arena God, and are very few that have a relationship with the agentic God. And
Rahmana Libam Doresh. What do you not understand about Rahmana Libam Doresh?
So I mean, this obviously gets. I don't want to get into that whole conversation, but I don't think I don't when I say when you're saying it's a materialist view. Um, I go back to the prophets telling us that God does not want uh, our our sacrifices.
Of course. But that's
Okay, so
because Rahmana Libam Dorish, because there is an intelligent, agentic God who's much greater than anything we could ever be, and anything that we offer up to him is like nothing.
yeah,
And
but why do you think that agentic God wants? Like, why do you think that agentic God is his experience is, yes, I want you to keep the Sabbath the way this specific rabbi sees it, and that's it, and that's how it's going to be forever, and don't change it. It doesn't matter if Moses didn't do that; it doesn't matter.
I don't believe that at all. I believe there's a reason why we have Torah Shabbal Peh, and that Torah Shabbal
Yes,
Peh is not Torah Shabbat, and it is fundamentally different. But that's partially because you can no more have a standard relationship with God than you can have a standard marriage. There's no such thing as a standard marriage, right? And similarly, there's no such thing as a standard relationship with God. And Chazi's gone. And Chazi's back.
sorry, Jacob.
Did you hear what I said about a standard relationship with God and a
No,
standard marriage?
I missed that part.
You can no more have a standard relationship with God than you can have a standard marriage. Your marriage is very different from anybody else's marriage. At the
Sure.
same time, because your wife is an actual person and you're an actual person. And our relationship with God is like a marriage. God is an actual, like, God actually exists.
I'm so happy you gave that example. Just because, like I mentioned last time, just like Hosea says, you will now call me Ishi and no longer call me Baali.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so there is a time, we are co-creating with God, just like the oral Torah. God is, and I'm not saying you could do whatever you want. My point, my point would be that, and I'll give you this as an example. Maybe I'm wrong, but when I hear Rabbi Shirky come sift through the sources and come out and say confidently, or let's say courageously on his end, yes, I'm going to take this version of the Khatam Sofer, and I'm going to let this movement know now that now they can also keep the Sabbath. Now, forget if you disagree. I look at that as like, that is the co-creation. And now you can be like, well, Reform and Conservative are doing that. Hopefully, you look at someone and recognize that they're coming about this the best way possible and trying to do this via the most traditional path while still innovating. But that's co-creation, and is doing that. And I believe that if one is doing so with the right intentions and attempting to do so through the proper channels, then like I said, God, Messiah, and Elijah will have to sign off on that. But I have to live my.
I completely agree with you. This is why when Rav Avadia had the shoulders to tell the Ashkenazim in Eretz Yisrael that they can eat kidneys. He had the shoulders.
Yeah,
and
but you understand.
I don't know Rav Shirky that well. I haven't read his Teshuvot. And if he wrote a Tshuva, which I can actually read, I would be interested in reading his, because yes, this is something that actually a lot of Noachides, they get very upset when you tell them that they're not allowed to keep Shabbat. They really do. They get very, very upset. And so I don't want to deny that to them. At the same time, I have to worry about, look, I think the reason Hashem gave us the mitzvahs was not because Chalila, he needs us to keep mitzvahs. It's because spiritually there are actual realities. And I keep on going back to the microphone, right? How the Rebbe knew that, yes, he should be machmir on microphones. Like, frankly, there has been such a huge bracha to the Jewish people from the fact that he was machmir on electricity and was able to convince the Chazon Ish to be machmir on electricity, and like you seem to think, it would have been better if he hadn't convinced the Chazon Ish.
No. I don't think it would have been better. I don't think it would have been better. I think that there's a time and place, but the problem is, if you decide to categorize something and say like, and now this could never change, right? That's where the problem is, because
that's kafira. That's kafira. To say that something could never change, that's just plain kafira.
Yeah, but now we're at an inverse of lo b'shamayim here, because I'm totally fine with the example of the majority of rabbis rejecting Rabbi Eliezer and the heavenly voice, saying it's very nice that you have receipts where God is agreeing with you. However, we have a system, and our system, if it wants to change, renew, or do anything, has to happen through our system. That's all good. I love it. Great. More power to you. Hence, God gives his little jokingly smile, saying, my sons have bested me. Now we're in this reverse thing where, like, whatever the rabbis say, as if God said it, and we can no longer change it, and it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if it's a heavenly voice. It doesn't matter if it's another rabbi. And then you ask them, what is it that you want to hear, right? That will change your mind. And the answer is like, it's not a heavenly voice.
You come from a very, very different background than I do, where for you, you come from a place where lots of people were like, oh no, like, you come, being FFB is just so different from the experience I had, where everybody was constantly just throwing everything under the bus. And so for you, it's very nogea to constantly be talking about how important it is for the rabbis. And I agree, the rabbis, like somebody like Rabbi Breitowitz, I want Rabbi Breitowitz to feel comfortable to say, I allow the use of psychedelics as a sort of medication without having to worry about all the emails he gets and people losing their mind, right?
Right.
Because he has the shoulders and he's coming from a serious place in Yiddishkeit. And frankly, if Rabbi Breitowitz wants to say that chicken cheeseburgers are kosher, I'm seriously going to have to think about it, right? But at the same time, like, my concern is the absolute opposite of everything that you saw in your life, because in my life, everybody was like, yeah, God doesn't care if you drive on Shabbos, God doesn't care if you eat pork, God doesn't care about any of this stuff. The Dennis Prager type of religiosity is the best, like, as good as you can get, and it's not very great, who actually at least believes in God, but says, you know what, I shouldn't pray to God, because who am I to pray to God, right? And it's like, no, it doesn't work. So we come from very different places, and I think we basically agree, but you've had a very different experience than I've had.
I have to obviously be sensitive to that, so I agree that I am trying to burst out of a box, and in a certain sense, you're still saying, like, before you break this box open, let's just make sure that, like, we can identify the box, make sure that the box shape is clear, make sure people, if they want to find the box, they can get into the box. And I'm already, yes, in a certain sense, I'm sort of past that, but only because I'm not looking to invent something new. I'm looking to return to what I believe is the source. But Jacob, I hear what you're saying. I understand that coming from that place and hearing the words I say could be also very alarming at sometimes, because obviously I don't think you think I have bad intentions, but I am being very loose, fast and loose with a lot of terms. And part of it is also just to create, is to push the envelope. I'm not walking around saying, like, everyone now should be using smartphones on the Sabbath. My general concern is when that happens, I don't want people to be caught blindsided.
Nobody's going to be caught blindsided, Chazi. Vast majority of Jews are already, and honestly, even, I mean, sometimes I kind of wonder, like, do you not realize that plenty of people living in Mea Shearim, like behind closed doors, they don't actually keep Shabbos at all, and it's all for show?
Yeah, but I think that's because that is the reaction to the religion they're experiencing. And if they didn't have to experience their religion the way as dogmatic as it is, and if their relationship with God wasn't necessarily with the angry, or even while at times loving, but still very judgmental and fire and brimstone God, there would be a different relationship. You wouldn't have to hide in your closet and turn on your phone. That doesn't have to be the relationship.
Some people are just grub, Chazi. Some people are just grub.
What do you mean they're just grub? They're food?
Maybe this is a Hasidic term, but like some people are just not spiritual people, and they're not very good people. They want what they want, and they don't care. There are people who steal because they don't care about anybody else. Some people are bad people, Chazi.
No, but that's sure, okay. Some people are bad people. But if we want to have a conversation, it's like I just think we don't have the time and the privilege to start having conversations of like, well, these reforms aren't considered good, and these group of Orthodox are too intense, and this group of like, we're past that. We're back here. We're back in our land. I'm not saying everyone has to do their same thing. I'm just saying if you want to have a conversation which moves past, if anyone is looking to move forward, but the conversations are stalemate and no one wants to talk to any other community and no one who wants to try to better understand where one's coming from, then...
The question is, what is forward, Chazi? And you don't know what forward is. Nobody knows what forward is.
Forward, I think...
The future hasn't happened.
I'm with you. Forward means to me less vitriol, less hate, more love on the basis. No problem. You don't eat by this rule. He does eat by the rabbi. That's fine. At least say it out loud. Make it very clear to your community. Our Sephardi brothers and our Ashkenazi brothers and our Reform brothers, they are all loved.
No. The Reform brothers are not loved. No. So, Reform is not loved.
Do you hear it?
Not
okay,
by me.
Jacob. Okay,
no.
So Jacob, think about this for a second. You have the patience, love, and understanding to give a Christian, right, which arguably you could say your religion has lambasted, hated, called out, had 1,001 issues with, and you could say that after years of bloodshed, you can in theory have the right to be upset at them, yet you will spend hours of your time explaining, going into the thinnest minutiae, reading their books. But a Reformed person is thrown off. That's it. You're done. Yeah. You're out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you have to. This is what you have to understand, Chazi. That this is what you have to understand. It's far, far, far harder for me to deal with the fact that somebody I consider a friend is a Reform rabbit, than to deal with Father Eric being or Paul being Trinitarians, or somebody being a Muslim, or somebody being a Hindu. Because guess what? Have you read Uri Zohar's book, My Friends, We've Been Robbed?
Yes.
Talk to some of the people. Talk to Max. Talk to Max on the Discord server. There is a real sense of these people are charlatans who have hurt our community, who are Reform has done serious damage. I have written long screeds.
Wait, 1 second. Serious damage to who? To the Jewish people? You mean like the millions of Jews that were killed, like that kind of damage?
No, serious damage as in personally. I feel that going to Reform synagogues and seeing my religion being mocked by them, by the silly things that they do, that by passing off their very, very human and not Jewish things as Jewish, like, it's offensive.
Okay. I understand that it's offensive, Jacob, but I would say that that's where you need to go then, where it gets tense. Like you've managed to
Oh
have.
yes, and I have been, and I've been trying to go to my friend's synagogue, and I've been trying to be nice to Reform and conservative, but let's be 100% clear. It's a lot easier for me to be kind to religious Christians and religious Muslims and religious Hindus than charlatans who are pretending to pass off Judaism.
One second, Jacob. Are all of them charlatans, or could some of them be just unaware?
Some of them are unaware, but the fact is there's a reason why. And Chezi gets a phone call. Eddie says, this is like one of those streams with a video game underneath. Not sure what you mean. Oh, that we're watching, well, the Doggie Cam? I have to say I love the Doggie Cam. I am very proud of the Doggie Cam. Even if she is asleep. And I won't say her name because she'll wake up. Or did you mean the sound of Chezi and his daughter? His daughter was watching TV while he's making soup for Shabbos. You're back.
Jacob, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was saying that maybe that's the place to go. Maybe that's like I'm saying. Maybe that's the next avenue.
It is. But at the same time, you know what? I'm very happy that JTS is closing one campus and HUC is closing 2 more campuses because they can't get people to go to their rabbinical schools because people have too much integrity to be the types of charlatans that you have to be a Reform or conservative rabbit.
Okay, I'm trying to not use the word charlatan because my attitude is that even while their interpretation.
Some people are bad people, Chezi.
Yes, but I'm saying I think the movement is a bad reaction. Right now, you can be like, Chezi, the things that you're asking for are going to end up leading us into like another version of Reform Judaism. So that's why I keep on saying I'm not a rabbi and I'm not the guy to make these decisions. But I don't think things could stay as is. I just don't think they're charlatans which are trying
Things have never stayed as is. You keep on talking about like educating women and all of the things that Orthodox Judaism is not. It's not a carbon copy of how things were even 100 years ago or 200 years ago, and certainly not what it was 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Of course, the Torah is mechadesh every single, there's a reason why the Yanuka has to write halachic responsa. And
okay, so good. So let's stick on that for a second. Okay.
Yeah.
Things are changing. They haven't been the same. the Amish, okay, and let's say the ultra Orthodox, arguably, are still more, and this is true about the Muslims as well, have less reformations within their community. Would you agree with that?
I don't think you can compare the Orthodox Jewish community to the Amish and the thing.
Large strokes. I'm talking about people that are still in a certain way. I'm not judging that in this, as am I. Are still more tethered to the past. Okay, but they are doing so also culturally and physically, which would be, let's say, the garbs they're wearing. Now, how do you imagine in your little project over here that you're having? Yeah. How do you imagine like you could be sure that a Reform or Christian Jew is going to have a much easier time with you having this kind of conversation right here than a Haredi person. He's going to be like, what on earth are you doing over here? What is this? You're wasting your time.
I asked my rabbi, who's about as Haredi gets.
Yeah.
He's a Chabad shliach, and he became Chabad. Like he comes from a Snagdisha background, and he became Chabad, and he's very, very Hasidish. And I asked
give me an example of one. Tell me the community. Tell me what they're doing in Mashar. Tell me what they think about this.
No. Okay, Mashar is different. Look, read. I have the book around here, Turning Judaism Outwards, right? So Chabad, the Rebbe was machadish many things, and when you look at, it's funny, but actually Hasidism, like, I think part of the problem is you grew up with Litbox.
I mean, yes, I guess like that was at home, but like again, there was very much like a lot of Hasidism going on. Like the library was full of that.
Baruch Hashem, yes. And in fact, like the Hasidic fervor is in fact penetrating those Rahman al-Islam and Misnagdisha places that are full of the things. But look, Hasidus is what repelled Reform. Reform did not. Where was Reform not able to establish itself? Where there is Hasidus and Neo-Hasidism, like. People call me a neo-Chassid, and I kind of, in a certain sense, am, because, look, Torah Baal Shem Tov is actually very much about revival and Chiddush and revolutionary, in a sense.
I agree with that, but I think those conversations preach love and understanding, and we need to do that also with our Reform and conservative brothers as well.
I try to do that. Ahavas Yisrael is very, very important. But at the same time, when I hear somebody like you not properly seeing the dangers of Reform, it's kind of like, it feels like, oh, like, are we just gonna make the same mistakes over and over again? And I hope not.
I hope not too. I definitely hope not. And I try to usually say that I'm very okay with certain things becoming more lenient and certain things becoming more stringent. I'm not looking for an easy way out. I'm looking for moving forward. And by moving forward, it's not because like I just want a newer version. I just want to get closer. I want to understand more. I want to go deeper. And but like again, this little corner is an example of that. Like, in a certain sense, this has been like the most enjoyable Torah that I learned has been on this channel.
That's
in a certain sense.
That's Kishma.
Okay. So, but you could see how if I was. You understand, though, how my religious institution can't accept that, right? They can't accept that.
Well, your religious institution, I guess you need to be more Chabad.
But you understand that most modern Orthodox.
It's not just modern Orthodox. Look, when Zevi talks about how parochial the Chabad community. Look, wherever you go, people are going to be human beings. That's the problem with people. They're human beings. They people all over the place, as Mark puts it. Right?
What are your thoughts on what do you thought about that idea of Paul, Zevi, and Jonathan Peugeot?
I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. And actually, Vervaeke, too. Why not? But I don't think Vervaeke necessarily will come. But yeah, Zevi, look, he's from birth. And from birth people are just, they're precisely the people that Paul Vanderklay is constantly talking about, like the atheist Christians who don't realize all the wealth and the water they swam in. From birth people have no appreciation for all the beautiful things. I'm sorry. You just can't. You can't appreciate the beautiful things that you live in day to day.
Well, I could tell you I try my best to to be self-critical and self-aware, but sure, okay, yes, that's correct. We're in intersectionality land. I don't have your experience, your lived experience of not being observant or religious from
having no Torah, having no Shabbos, I remember when I was a kid, it must have been like 14 years old. My dad suddenly, for some reason, came home from work and he decided that he wants to make Kiddush. And I was already in bed, right? And he drags me out of bed that Friday night he wants to make Kiddush, right? And I couldn't wait to go back to bed, and I thought he was crazy, right? And that was the one time at home that we decided to make Kiddush that I have no idea what got into my father that he wanted to make Kiddush that Friday night.
I texted him. Even though it was Shabbos, I just felt it was the right thing.
Right. But you had Kiddush every single Friday night. And you had a family meal every single Friday night. And you had cholent every single Shabbos day. And you had your father teaching you Torah. And you had so many things that it's just all over you.
But Jacob, I agree with you. But isn't there something about then? Isn't there something about? And this is you usually have this with Balei Tshuva, right? They come, and a Balei Tshuva almost never turns into modern Orthodox.
Of course
right?
not.
Because I can't be not because it's not because they're fake. It's just I can't transition into something that's like quasi like what I lived before.
No, it's beyond that. No, Chezi. Okay, so for me, one of the hardest things was being Shomer Negia. Right? Okay. I went to so many job interviews. Always the person interviewing me was a woman, and I always had to start off by saying I don't shake hands.
Even though you can, specifically in that reason. That would be a perfect example, Chezi, which is like
Chezi, listen to the story.
Go on.
I went to Posek after Posek. I never went Posek shopping. I went to Posek. I said, find me a Posek who will allow me to shake hands, and I will change my entire Shita. Right?
Okay.
I went from Posek to Posek. All I got from modern Orthodox was there's a tshuva written by Yeshiva University's career office that nobody signed. Nobody signed.
Do you want me to send you some tshuvas today?
Send me some tshuvas. But guess what? These tshuvas were not around 20 years ago when I was trying to find them. And the only thing that modern Orthodox gave me was literally, the rabbis were like, the career office at Yeshiva University says it's allowed. And I actually went and read where they say it's allowed. And they don't name anybody. Nobody signed this. You expect me to take this seriously?
You should have called me.
I should have called you 20 years ago?
Yeah. I feel like as like a 17-year-old boy, I still could have answered you. No. I so, but let's use that as an example. So obviously, it's very unfortunate that you didn't get an answer for that. However, that would be an example where someone is now under the impression that he like he's going to lose this dream job. And I'm not saying like, oh, it's a dream job, but you need to work on Sabbath. There are levels to this. But shaking this person's hand, that is offense over offense over offense. Where you're like, oh, now I assume if I shake her hand, God is mad at me now.
Okay,
And I'm going to be punished right now.
Chazi, I actually tried to learn the sugya myself. And I tried looking into it. Derech chiba. It is chiba. It is chiba. What? Shaking hands is not derech chiba?
No, not culturally, no.
Yeah, it is. It is 100% derech chiba. That's why you're doing it. And frankly, it's yareg val yavor.
That would be the example. That like you could have a lovely conversation with someone that quote unquote is doing idol worship, and then there are Jews that, according to some rabbis, are not doing an issue. However, you have no problem saying that it better they kill themselves than shake this person's hand.
That's not what yareg val yavor means. It doesn't mean you should kill yourself. But ultimately, there is that story of the girls on the ship in the Gemara. Look, when it comes down to it, this is not a place where I see a serious place. And even though everybody in the modern world shakes hands left and right, I see no makor for it in halacha at all.
Oh, so excited to give you them. Yes, good.
You can try, but this was one of the things. I went from rabbi to rabbi. I tried so hard to even see a tzad where you could be mekel, and it's like it doesn't exist. It was just people just deciding to be mekel because they wanted to.
1 second. To be fair, though, I'm going to give you now answers, but you have to decide for yourself. Like, if I give you something, he's like, oh, he's not a serious guy. This guy's a joker. This guy's a loser. What is he quoting over here? So, like, for example, I could give you a shita like Noahites could keep the Sabbath, and you'd be like, bah, nonsense.
I want to see where your makor is. This is why I love reading tshuvas. I love reading tshuvas. I'm sure when you sent me that list of the books of the, I feel like the last one you thought I would want is the shoot. I'm sure you don't love reading tshuvas.
By the way, if no, there was a stage where I loved reading tshuvas. There's a great set. You could see if you could get it in the States. It's by Eretz Chemda, and it's called Shoot B'Mar'eh HaBazak. And there's 6 volumes of them. Don't get the leather-bound one. Just get the regular purple one. And it is fascinating questions from all over the world that this group Eretz Chemda deals with. They're all like studying like on the Dayanim
Zionists.
Yes, they're Zionists, but I would just tell you that they're all very serious Talmidei Chacham, and they just sit and learn all day there. But
Even if they're Zionists.
There's fascinating chewing over there. Jacob, my daughter has had enough of Barney,
No.
and I have to play with her. Buddy, have a Shabbat Shalom and take care.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm guessing if anybody watches this, they're not going to understand, like, even a tiny bit. But watch, people will be will be interested. You weirdos.
Hey, Jacob. Well, let me see. Do I have things working here? It's the Doggie Cam. Can you hear me? Ugh. Camera's working. Why can't I hear you? Yes.
Because I'm muted. Because I was silly. That's why. It's late. Why are you up so late?
I just got back from the Jordan Peterson event in Wheatland.
Ooh, how was it?
It was great. This was my 6th time going to his live event, and this was the best speech he's given. It was really very good. I really liked it.
Well, this is what I don't think you actually kind of appreciate about the speech tour. He gets a lot of feedback through giving the speeches. That's there is a two-way relationship there that you. So you've always been really down on the speeches, whereas I think they help him understand what's going on a lot better.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes good sense. So then I went with a friend who's a big Jordan Peterson fan, and we met Jordan and Tammy backstage. Had a nice time with them. It was great. It was great. So, really good, really good. So I'm all got home late, and I've got all this adrenaline going. So it's like I'm not going to sleep, and so I'm watching YouTube, and hey, look who's there! Ah, look who else is here.
Well,
The Doggie Cam, come on, you gotta love the Doggie
yeah,
Cam.
I'm only here for the dog camp. So.
It's this is the best part of moving my office home. Like now I have I can put a camera on Happy, and it's perfect.
Oh, that's lovely. Happy's a wonderful dog. I really like Happy.
Happy is a wonderful dog, although she's been misbehaving a bit. She destroyed her kennel. Like she was not very happy about this apartment being so big. It's kind of too big, so when I leave her alone, she gets anxious.
Oh,
Yeah, but we're working through it.
good.
You missed my discussion with Jonathan today.
With which Jonathan?
You don't know Jonathan. He went to Calvin College.
Wow.
And he's a Noahide, and he lives in eastern Michigan.
Oh my goodness. Is it recorded? Can I find it?
Yeah, it was my Just Chatting stream today.
Oh, okay. So he came
Yeah.
on, huh?
Yeah, he's come on a couple of times. He's very gung ho about this Noahide thing.
Oh.
He was a Catholic while he was at Calvin College.
Yeah. Calvin had to keep enrollment up. It's had to recruit far beyond the CRC. Oh, there's Hezzy. Wow, this
There
is
is
fun.
Hezzy.
I want to stand.
Yeah, you want to
I
say
was going to
what?
say, Jacob, I want to apologize that I stand corrected with regards to telling you that there are multiple people that allow shaking women's hands. There are two. There are two.
Who are these two people?
Two people that you're not going to appreciate and you're not
Of
going to like.
course. Yeah.
But I didn't mean to derail your conversation. However, if I can just hijack for 1 second, Pastor Paul. Pastor Paul, you're coming to Israel.
I want to.
This is going down. Wheels are in motion already.
Wow.
We're having a symposium with you, Jonathan Peugeot, Zevi Slavin. Maybe Vervaeke's going to come in, but this is going to be fantastic.
Wow.
Awesome.
I'm glad you're game.
I talked to Jordan tonight. I think he's getting a little jealous of the of the Thunder Bay dynamic.
Yes.
But the problem with Jordan is if he goes someplace, it'll just
Yeah.
blow out the attendance, you know.
Well, if we do it correctly, not like how John Van Donk wants to do it, it then look, I worked Comic-Con. Comic-Con can work. If Comic-Con can work, so can our conventions, which are going to have 5 to 10,000 attendees. Yes, that is my plan.
One day.
I have much bigger plans than anything John Van Donk is comfortable with.
Okay. Well, when are we going to do this Israel thing? 2024?
Yeah, February 2024, I think.
That's what I suggested. You think February 2024 is good? Worm cutting?
I just think as far as the weather in Israel, you're talking about like the transition into like a beautiful spring. The prices are low then. You're not talking crazy tourism season then. So the attitude would be have, let's say 3 days, which are like agenda days packed. And then I would say the rest people could do their thing, obviously. But I don't know. I'm thinking, well, we can decide which way to go about it, but there could be psalms and meditation in the desert. There could be a lot of things following the footsteps of the Essenes. We could go look at the Qumran caves. But obviously there has to be also there has to be like a strong Christian component to this. So like we have to figure out exactly where people would want to go. I'm talking together with a tour guide right now, a cousin of mine, trying to locate areas that would be fruitful for cross-pollination conversations, which would be like, what's going on over here at this time, historically, where are the Jews, where are the Christians? But on the other hand, maybe that's going to be a mistake to stress that too long. I'm just very excited in general.
Ultimately, all of this, Mises is going to make all the decisions because he's now the new czar of this little corner.
Really?
Why do you use the word czar? Again, I thought you should have some sort of ethnic post-traumatic stress from using a word like that.
Yes, I use it sarcastically because people like think that I'm trying to set up some sort of czar or something, and it's funny.
I can't imagine why people would think that when you keep saying it.
You mentioned, Paul, right now that using czar would be post-traumatic. So I was just talking to Jacob earlier how I'm not putting you on the spot, Jacob, and if I am, I'm sorry. How it's very interesting to me that Jacob could have these amazing, loving, beautiful conversations with Christians on this amazing channel. However, when he's talking to, let's say, Reform or conservative Jews, it's very difficult for him. And it's interesting that even though czar, post-traumatic, all the bloodshed in issues of Jews and Christians, Jacob feels extremely comfortable over here. But within his own camp, there is still much tension.
I believe it. It's very common.
I don't think there's anything strange about it.
You always have more animosity with your rivals, the ones who are close.
Well, I don't even know if it's really a rival thing. I make lots of fun about Chazi being Litvish and whatchamacallit, and a Zionist and stuff, but at least we have Reform and conservative, they just disgust me.
That's what I mean, Jacob. Well, you had it was all good until that one line that they discussed you.
You had dinner with.
I took Richard and his parents. We went to dinner with my friend who's a Reform rabbit, and she's got her Reform synagogue. She's actually a conservative rabbit, but yeah.
And we went to Shabbat. Was it Shabbat? We went to
Shabbat services at a Reform synagogue, and Friday night they had a Torah reading, Chazi.
Right, so I guess, Pastor Paul, I would wonder what you think about this, because this is true, obviously, within the Christian denominations, and you're dealing with this a little with the Christian Reformed Church and how they deal with like sort of gay marriage. And on the Voxer, there was a conversation right now with someone that's trying to see how they navigate like the trans community while being Christian. So, and to a certain extent, I'm going to Jacob and I'm saying, if you have room to accommodate the Christian, like how within our own religion do we not have room to accommodate the gay Jew, basically?
Because
like,
Christians believe in God.
I think Reform and conservative Jews also believe in God, Jacob.
The Jews do, the rabbits don't. They don't. This is the thing. No. Chazi, Max, one of the things Max posted a video of a conservative rabbit and a reform rabbit talking, and both of them said over 90% of their classmates at their seminaries did not believe in God.
1 second. To be fair, don't believe in the man in the sky or
No. They're. This is what you don't understand, Chazi. Reform and conservative are actually materialists. They don't believe in God.
I would argue that they don't believe, or their relationship with the agentic God is non-existent.
This is the thing. You're turning them into what you wish they were, as opposed to recognizing them for what they are.
Or I'm looking at them with like a kind eye and trying to best interpret what their relationship is with God, because I find it hard to believe that this whole movement, which stems from a clearly monotheistic relationship, is not going to now just decide all of a sudden that 90% of us don't believe in God. I would say they have probably a closer relationship with Maimonides' God, which is, not a God you necessarily are praying to and is accepting your prayers.
You need to actually talk to Reform and conservative rabbits, and then you will understand.
I've spoken to one or two, but I hear you, Jacob. I'll take it into consideration.
I'll send you that video, Max. I'll try to find that video Max brought, and you can actually listen to them talking amongst themselves and explaining what they actually believe. And yeah, it's very hard to believe that these people spend their time going to synagogues when they don't actually believe in God, but they don't.
I would say their actions speak otherwise.
No, they themselves, like Shira, my friend, she actually believes in God. But a lot of these rabbits will actually tell you they don't believe in God. And in a Jordan Peterson way, I don't believe that there's any such thing as an atheist, and I think they're silly and they're stupid for saying they don't believe in God, but they still say it.
Just to turn back to the Christian camp, I was surprised to read today an email that Paul wrote on CRC Voices about the URC, which is a denomination that split off the CRC in the 90s. And one of my close friends is of URC background. His dad is a URC pastor in Washington. And I was very surprised to read how heated that split was.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
The CRC is a very close knit denomination and has been, not as much as it used to be, but people take these things very seriously, and so and I think part of it too was that the progressives who wanted women in office were quite happy that a lot of those people left, and other people were angry, and so it was ugly in the 90s.
Well, Pastor Paul, and this is again, maybe this is different in Judaism, but what are the considerations you take when you need when you're considering that? Because I was mentioning earlier, maybe it was a day or two ago, that in one of these synagogues that I was a part of during a certain part of my life, the rabbi there eventually brought in a female rabbi, and I was upset because if you're going to do that move, I was just not very impressed by her. I thought, like, if you want to come off the gate
Yeah.
by doing something, this needs to be something that's very impressive.
Yeah.
However, what like where do you see innovation as sort of rediscovering or reinterpreting what God is expecting from us, and where do you find it as like, no, like this can't change?
Well, in my read of the New Testament of the very early church is that I don't believe that women were prohibited from, in many ways, leading churches. And I think the best example of that is Lydia. If you read about Lydia in the book of Acts, Paul receives hospitality from her. It seems like in the very early church, many churches were 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 basically these home groups, and the householder, the leader of the household, in many ways was the leader of the church. Now, I think there's also a difference between Protestant and Catholic in this, because a priest is functioning in a particular role that I think the gender has more to do, whereas in Protestant churches, ministers have a slightly different theology behind the role, partly due to um, the man that Jacob hates and his idea of the priesthood of all believers. And so my position is that I don't see a lot of reason for barring women from ministry in the Christian Reformed Church, but I also understand the the complementarians and how they're reading the Bible, and so I would rather see this experiment play out. It might be that this is something that becomes very exceptional. Women, even in the Christian Reformed Church, where now it's been permitted for 25 years plus, women are still a tiny minority of preaching pastors in the Christian Reformed Church, and I don't think that's going to change. There are some really tremendously gifted women who are capable of giving terrific sermons, of doing well with pastoral care. And again, in a Protestant church, there's that's different from, let's say, a priest in a Catholic or Orthodox church in terms of the theology and the functionality of that, of what a priest is in terms of the drama of the liturgy. So I've been a mentor, and I've helped actually a fair number of women get into the ministry of the Christian Reformed Church, and I've been known for that. But I also am, I also will defend the complementarians in their position, because I understand where they're coming from, even if I think actually, in all likelihood, in the very earliest days of the church, women, in fact, were functioning in those roles. But a lot of what we have now in terms of priests, that whole language, you don't find the language of priests leading churches in the New Testament at all. I mean, that's a later development, which fair enough, but it's you don't find it in the New Testament.
What do you do with bishops? I mean, aren't bishops mentioned in the New Testament?
Well, presbyters. So in the Presbyterian traditions, like the Christian Reformed Church, they're really elders. So no, not you don't really have the development of this formal hierarchy like you see in the Roman Catholic Church in the New Testament.
Really? So there's no episcopus or anything like that? I thought the overseer was something that existed.
Yeah, but basically you had a lot of Protestant churches basically tried to only take what was in the Bible. And so this hierarchy, as you see it, isn't really there. Now, this has continued to change. For example, in the 20th century, people began playing around in Protestant churches with the office of apostle. But for the most part, the Christian Reformed Church has always just said we find elders, presbyters, and deacons in the Bible, and so that's what we're going to stick with.
In Judaism, there is a legal issue with women taking positions of authority. Okay, now some of that is probably due to cultural and historical reasons. The pushback against that is always given an example of the prophetess Deborah, when she obviously and Moses' sister Miriam. Um, there is a function though, and maybe I wonder if this is in any way analogous to confession, but part of the argument is that, let's say, purity laws between husband and wife, and specific laws that relate to women. For years, that was a discussion that they had to have with men or rabbis, which didn't necessarily understand or weren't sensitive enough to sort of that whole conversation. Add on top of that, now there's a very large movement in Israel, and I think in Judaism in general, with women's learning and learning groups, and the Orthodox communities sort of accommodated. It's called a religious advisor, and that was like the term that these women have gotten. Some communities have female rabbis, which are still considered within the Orthodox community, but they're far and few between. But I think the main allure is also this allows the female congregation to engage in a different level than they have ever before. And I wonder is that true also in Christianity, where if I want to confess something, I don't want to be talking to male Joe.
Yep. And even in so I do work with Korean classes in Southern California. In one of those classes is a group of churches. I was at one, and the Koreans are very, men only for pastors, women pastors. I'm sitting at this classes meeting, and this woman comes in, and one of the Koreans who's translating for me says, she's a minister. I said, what? He's like, he was somebody who was born in America. He's like, yeah. I said, well, how does that work? He's like, I don't know. They just, they're fine with her. And so it's an exceptional thing. In the Dominican Republic, women couldn't be pastors or preachers, but there was a position in almost every church called a dama misionera, which basically meant a ladies missionary. And these women had tremendous power and authority in the churches. They preached, they taught, they took care of the women. At Living Stones, we've had female elders the whole time that I've been there. I've usually tried to have male and female elders, male and female deacons, because there are many situations where you want a woman to deal with the women. and that had often happened, like ministers' wives would often sort of like second clergy. So there's lots of situations where there's a fair amount of fluidity. And so, whatever the rules are, usually these groups find a way to meet their needs and usually concoct a way to have names and positions that help facilitate that.
You're muted, Fezzi.
I said that's the tension, though, going back to reform and conservative, which is we're all trying to mold ourselves through these rules and make our way through this as well. It's the end of modernity, but as time goes by, and the assumption is, as you're saying, what was going on in the Dominican Republic is the reason you accepted this seemingly is because they're coming from the right place. Their intentions are good. They want, however, in Judaism, it's almost like it doesn't matter if your intentions are good in a certain extent. It's just like, well, there's the letter of the law and there's how you go about it. And Jacob, you're sort of saying that even if the reform movement has good intentions, and you'll excuse me if I'm wrong, but
the question is, what's a good intention? If your intention is to obliterate the differences between men and women, then you're just going against Judaism.
I hear that.
The fact is, women have always been very powerful, and they've always had important roles within Judaism, and they will continue. Like, there was a Hasidic Rebbe 200 years ago, who the Megillah of, I forget where she's from. She was a Hasidic Rebbe, right? 200 years ago. And so, but this prohibition of srara, of women holding office, is something that even modern Orthodox has held fast to, because it's a question of gender roles. And Judaism is a sexist religion. We believe that there's a difference between men and women.
I agree with that. I agree with that, Jacob.
Well, in right now in Protestantism, there's two of the labels that are used often are egalitarian, who usually allow women in the ministry and ordained office, and then complementarian, who often don't. But the complementarians have their own way, usually, of involving women in the ministry. So yeah, church religious communities find a way, and they have for a very long time, and that's part of the reason I try not to make too big of a deal over it. And I think part of the problem has been, it was when part of what happens in modernity is that everything implicit has to become explicit. And there's an issue when everything becomes explicit. So now we're going to start counting and tagging and measuring, and then more problems arise in some ways. And again, there's value to some making implicit things explicit sometimes, but sometimes leave the implicit alone and let the community find its way of doing things.
Yup. And I don't hate Martin Luther.
Oh, you were going to burn churches that were using his name.
I was using his language to point out how ridiculous what he said was.
Mm-hmm.
I was quoting him, talking about burning down synagogues.
Oh, well.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Well, I want to hear, Richard, how's school going?
Oi.
I would say it's going well. I had a talk with Jacob about my grades last semester, which weren't the best. I'll say it that way. What happened was I got to Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics, a very dense text, and I saved it for the night before, started at 10 p.m., and by 4 a.m. I was only 60 pages in out of 160, and said I have to go to bed, I can't do this, and so that started a chain reaction of just discouragement, and
Yeah.
so it was really unfortunate actually, because after Aristotle we started the Pentateuch, and so I didn't finish Genesis, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Deuteronomy. Yeah, and then I finished Joshua and Hebrews. I finished strong, and
Good.
so they don't give you your grade until your final oral exam. And so and they don't give a very specific rubric. And so I thought, I think I could get away with A minus. It's just 4 books. We read a lot, and he was calculating the grade for me, and he said, "Well, Richard, technically you're supposed to get an F, but because we want you to stay in the program, we're gonna give you a C for the
Wow.
semester."
That's very generous.
And so that was definitely weird, and spurred a lot of conversation with mom, also with dad, but also more with mom. And yeah. So lesson learned, definitely. And I just have always struggled with procrastination and saving things last minute and not being able to pace things. And so that's just a thing I'm going to work on continually.
Yeah.
It scares me that my 57-year-old small business owner dad is still turning in permits to the city office 5 minutes before the deadline and things like this. So um, we'll see if I can fall farther from the tree than average
Okay.
in that regard. But but I think because I talked with Jacob and my mom, we had similar conversations about whether I should have lied
I
about
didn't
the
say you
design.
should lie, but
Hey,
you're
hey,
a little bit too honest for your own
Jacob,
good.
I did not say that you told me to lie. I was just saying that we discussed whether I should lie.
Christians unfortunately turn truth into an idol.
This is an interesting conversation, Paul, that we had. But anyway, because I had another friend who got away with a lot more than I did. Um, he ended up dropping out of the college, but he did get an A without reading 90% of the curriculum.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know. I feel like me being honest has me on better footing than if I wasn't. And so I think it's gonna spur a lot more improvement. Um, yeah, otherwise would. So.
Well,
But
good.
I really enjoyed it. The curriculum's great. I'm starting this nice and early to do God.
Ugh, Augustine.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. Is that City of God?
yeah, we only
Oh,
read half.
there's a big book.
We only read half of it. Um, Selected books. It's our last 3 sessions that we discuss it. So I'm starting early. Um, but I've been loving that, and
Good.
we we started this semester with Roman literature. So we read the Aeneid and the Metamorphoses by Ovid. We just finished Cicero yesterday, and we're doing Plutarch's Roman Lives on Monday, and then we jump into um, the Gospels and the Epistles on Wednesday.
Oh, cool.
So it's all going great, and the philosophy department here has been stellar. One of the professors, as it happens, was a student of Alvin Plantinga at
Oh, okay.
Notre Dame, and so that was really cool to hear. Really top notch faculty, and so it's been a great experience here at Iowa. So
Wonderful.
yeah,
It's not unusual for students in their first semester of college to have to recognize some readjustment from high school. I
yeah.
spent my first semester at Calvin. I spent way too much time at the foosball table in the basement of the dorm. Got really good at foosball,
Mm,
but the grades suffered. So after I got a C in a course, it was like, yeah. So things went up from there.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping as well. So one thing that is bio related that I wanted to get your take on because it's been rattling around in my mind quite a bit. Couple months ago, um, a bunch of us on one of these just challenge streams were talking about different locations we could hold um, these conferences at, and I threw out Biola as a place because Jacob and I think a lot of us want to include the university as a place where we do these things. And Sam was in the call, and he mentioned that he had a personal desktop with Dr. Fred Sanders here, who you might know, and it wasn't the best exchange. And he said something like, "If we do something at Biola, I don't want Dr. Fred Sanders screaming heretic and chasing us off campus." And so I've had that rattling around in my head about the status of Biola and its openness towards something more
Well,
heterodox.
like I told John Mindonk, I could probably get us onto USC's campus, but he doesn't. He wants to do it in Chino, which is only a 2-hour drive from Los Angeles.
Well, I mean, for John, it's also a function of this isn't just a conference for the followers of this little corner. This is something that he wants to involve his church with for the good of his church. And I think I agree with him on that. I think this would be good for his church. It's a stretch for his church in some ways, but I think it's a good stretch.
Okay, I was hoping for something with over 1,000 people, and he's hoping for something with under 500 people. And
well, you can do things with a conference under 300 that you can't do with a conference of 1,000.
True, but at the same time, there is a certain feeling of camaraderie and, yes, I am all for having small, intimate things, but at the same time, there's also a certain feeling of being like at a concert with thousands of people that it has a, dare I say, perspectival and participatory quality to it that I think is also important.
I don't think we could gather 1,000 people without Jordan Peterson.
I completely disagree. I could probably get you 1,000 people just in Los Angeles, from people from around Los Angeles within driving distance of here.
For Vervaeke and Peugeot.
For you.
No.
Just you, or the three of them?
The three of them certainly.
No. It's going to be interesting to see how John's goes in terms of, because we got 150, 200 in Thunder Bay with Catherine.
How many people did we get in Chicago who flew in from other states?
Yeah, but Chicago was small.
Yes, it was tiny. It was unnecessarily tiny.
Yeah,
you guys think too small.
We'll know better after Chino to see what kind of interest we can draw.
The fact that it's in Chino is going to severely limit the number of people who come.
Severely. Chino's not that hard to get to. In fact, in a lot of ways, I'd rather fly into Ontario Airport than LAX.
Do you know how much cheaper it is to fly into LAX than Ontario?
Not much at all. I fly into all of those airports down there regularly.
You fly from Sacramento.
Yes.
As opposed to somebody flying from New York.
Yes. Definitely, if you're taking a flight from New York, you can get into LAX cheaper.
Much cheaper. And Chicago. And this is the thing. People are traveling internationally to see you, Paul. That means that you have a very large draw that, frankly, I don't think you quite appreciate how broad and real your fan base is.
I guess I don't. I've looked at what we've drawn in different places and failed to draw, and I don't think it's that big.
Honestly, I thought that the reason the Chicago events were named so incredibly religiously was because there were local churches who were going to be involved. Because frankly, people who I invited to show up to the Chicago event did not come because it sounded too Christian.
Interesting.
And when I saw that nobody showed up from an actual religious congregation, I was like, why did we name all of these things such Christian, like the future of evangelism? Really? You expect a lot of Jordan Peterson fans to be interested in the future of evangelism?
What would you name a conference of 1,000-member conference at USC, Jacob?
Consciousness and Conscience.
Part 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Consciousness and Conscience is a great name, and it's something that can, frankly, I was hoping Yosef would have his PhD right now. We could have people who are cognitive scientists and people coming from a religious background coming together, and we could have various religious groups, including that Mormon group of over 1,000 members that mostly live in somewhere within driving distance of Utah. And we're still looking at possibly having something at Brigham Young University, but you guys, you're not trying very hard for big events. It's like, and this is part of what I love about Moises is he actually believes in the coming of the Messiah, unlike some people.
Well, I eagerly anticipate the dramatic new changes that this new what's the name of the organization again?
Quite likely, Joyful Mother of Children Foundation.
Joyful Mother of Children Foundation. You're talking to me about conference naming? I'm not sure what people are going to think when they hear the name of that foundation.
They're not supposed to hear the name of that foundation. The foundation will be successful to the degree that nobody notices it exists.
Okay. All right. Well,
the foundation itself is supposed to be something in the background, and the analogies I've been making are you only notice the refs at a basketball game if they're not doing their job well, and you only notice that a wall is a load-bearing wall when you can't move it and it's in the wrong place. And I think the same thing is true of a good foundation. Nobody should actually notice that it exists, except the people who want to make sure that there is a solid foundation for what you're doing. And so, yeah, the foundation itself, hopefully, will be very, very, once it gets announced, I'm hoping people like Chad will forget it even exists.
Well, Chad's having fun making videos, so glad Chad's making videos again. It really helps me to keep up with Chad and Grizz to know what other videos are happening in the corner that are good. That's kind of circulation's really helpful.
Well, once we get looks like it's going to be 3 24/7 channels. Looking at the program should give you a good idea of what's going on in this corner.
I'm excited. Well, Jacob, I love it when you prove me wrong. It's great.
Only encouragement. Only encouragement. So,
Paul encourages all kinds of heretics like me.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, guy
Did
clearly has.
you see Jason's comment? I think I could fall asleep in PVK's beard right now. I mean, that's a high compliment. It looks very majestic.
Yeah, it's kind of the angle of the light right now, and so it's pretty long right now.
Didn't you say your wife, once it gets long enough, makes you cut it?
No.
Oh, it's not her. Okay, I thought she was the one.
In fact, if it's short, she complains more because then it's prickly. If it's long like this, it's actually very soft. Except some of the women at church like to grab onto it. My wife's like, although these women are up in age, and so my wife's not terribly concerned.
Yeah, I could never grow a beard.
Yeah, I'm curious if my attitude will change towards it, because I couldn't imagine myself with one now, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Fezzi has a question for you, Paul.
Okay.
Where would you want to go in Israel?
Well, obviously there's some things I want to see. I definitely want to see the Temple Mount. I definitely would, but I tend to trust locals because locals know where to go and what's good. So
Yeah, but it's a pilgrimage. I mean, aren't there things in, like, as a kid, didn't you wonder, like, I don't know, I mean, I would guess if I were a Christian, like, I would really want to see the Sea of Galilee.
yeah, that's on my list. I'd love to see the Sea of Galilee just because so much of the gospel stuff is around there. But it's one of the things that you see is that there's all these tours to Israel, and people go to Israel wanting to project their Sunday school pictures onto the landscape. And so like there's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is very likely the place of the tomb. And then there's this other place called the Garden Tomb, which looks like in all the Sunday school coloring books, and all the Christians go there and like, I really love the Garden Tomb. And it's like, that's because it looks like it does in your Sunday school books. This is 2,000 years ago. People have been going there, and it's not going to be like it looks in your Sunday school books.
When I went to the Western Wall the first time, it was the most disappointing thing in the world. Because growing up, like, a lot of Jewish homes have pictures of the wall, right? And I just always imagined it was huge, right? So for me, it was always this huge thing in my mind. And then when I went there the first time, it was just so small.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my god, it's so small. Oh, Chezi's at the wall right now.
Nice.
Yeah. When I was in yeshiva, when I had a hard day especially, so it was about a half an hour walk to the wall. So after night seder, so after dinner we had a 2-hour thing. So like around 9 o'clock, we would get out, and sometimes I would walk to the wall. And
is it that easy to get to?
Oh yeah, Jerusalem's tiny. I could walk around the entirety of the city in 8 hours.
Okay.
Wow.
Jerusalem is tiny. You will be shocked. It's smaller than Boston.
Wow.
Yeah. And the old city, yeah, it's really small. So my yeshiva wasn't that far away, so I would walk to the wall, and so the prayer services are morning, afternoon, and evening. So around midnight, some very pious people get up for there's a special service that very few people do, which is to mourn the destruction of the temple. And so people would come to the wall, and it would be dark, and like people would sit alone, and like and they would start crying, and I would be sitting there at the wall, and people would be crying. It was just, I still remember like those nights. It was like that year I was in Israel. I'm not kidding when I say like my hope is that after I die, heaven will be like that. Like, yeah.
Now, I've got a question for you, Jacob. If would you be in favor of rebuilding the temple and having sacrifices and such?
Yes. Oh, he's not at the wall. He's at the Galilee apparently.
Oh, wow.
With his family.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, rebuilding it physically?
Yes.
No, because I believe, like, Orthodox Jews, not the heretical Zionists, that there is a tradition we have, which I was very surprised to find it in the book of Hebrews, because it's a tradition was not really mentioned anywhere. For like, it's not written in the Talmud or anything like that. That the third temple will be built not by hands.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am opposed to the idea of building it physically, because it's supposed to be something miraculous, I believe. But the I like the reinstituting of actual sacrifices. There's different rabbis have different opinions about whether there will actually be sacrifices again, and I'm not that invested either way. Like I understand the idea. Like we pray constantly, Sheyivan Beit Hamikdash, that the temple will be rebuilt. Like that's something we say several times a day in our liturgy. But like I am completely opposed to the idea some people have, which like the Temple Institute, which gets all of its money from hyper-dispensationalist Christians. They're already they're growing the red heifers, and they made a gold menorah that's on display in Israel, and like they're doing all these things, and there are people who, like Ben Shapiro, will actually go onto the Temple Mount and stage prayers, even though it's illegal for Jews and Christians to pray on the Temple Mount. So it's a touchy issue.
Is some of this done, like Jews and Christians not to pray on the Temple Mount, just out of deference to the Muslims?
Legally the Temple Mount itself is under the control of the Waqf, which is the so Israel. The legal system in Israel is based on the old Ottoman system. So there are official religious authorities, and so the chief rabbinate is Orthodox Jewish, And so reform and conservative are not, you cannot, like a reform or conservative rabbit can't perform a wedding in Israel. So religious authorities have control over certain places, and for example, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right? It, like when you go there, it's actually kind of surreal because it's split into 4 quarters, and there's a different Christian denomination that has authority over each of the quarters of the church. Yeah. Like, I think the Catholics get one, and the Greek Orthodox have one, and the Armenian Orthodox have one, and like some Protestant group, I think the Anglicans have a 4th. Like, and so the Temple Mount itself is under the authority of the Waqf, and which is the Muslim authority, and they do not permit. While the Israeli Supreme Court has ruled that Christians and Jews are allowed to visit, it is illegal for Christians and Jews to pray on the Temple Mount, and there are Christians and Jews who regularly stage protests by having prayers on the Temple Mount, and it causes riots and all kinds of stuff. And the Orthodox Jewish position is that Jews are not allowed on the Temple Mount anyway. So, yeah.
Well, good folks, I think I'm going to head to bed. You have helped me come down. My adrenaline levels come down from.
I put you to sleep.
No, you're always.
Where were you before, Paul? I came in just as you.
I went to the Jordan Peterson event that was north of Sacramento.
Okay.
And then
Was
I
it
went.
big?
What's that?
Was it big? Like, how big was it?
Oh, I'd say there
Okay,
were
normal.
probably 2,000, maybe 2,000 or so people in that room.
Okay.
And then I met Jordan and Tammy backstage. I went with a friend of mine, so the 4 of us had about a half hour together, which was really cool.
Nice.
Nice.
Wonderful.
And I had a lovely talk, and so that was really terrific. And Jordan's, paying some attention to what's happening with the show under Vakey, and I talked to him about the Exodus. Exodus. Actually, they went from Exodus all the way through to Deuteronomy, so it sounds like they skipped and hopped on some things, and it sounds like David is next in line. So it's fun. It's fun.
I just wish he would actually have an actual rabbi.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't have actually a Christian minister either, and so
True.
Which is a problem. He like, it's having actual people who actually believe this stuff and care about it, and for whom it's real, means something.
Well, he's got plenty of people who care about it and believe in it that are around the table. They're just not clergy.
And okay, so the thing with Dennis Prager is, I love Dennis Prager and he's a really smart guy, but he's not bringing the wealth of the Jewish tradition with him.
I believe that. But it's hard in that seminar to do much. You've got a lot of people around that table.
Yeah.
If Rabbi Breitowitz was there, oh my God, it would be a completely different thing. Rabbi Breitowitz would have rocked that seminar. He would have.
You can't have everything.
Well, and I think another thing that Jordan did was, he has personal relationships with these people, and so I think that facilitated it. But Jacob, no, we can talk about the Bible, forever. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Gosh, so you know what I found out today? So I'm in a psychology class. I'm double majoring with psychology. Um, I'm in an adolescent and emerging adulthood class, and one of the tracks the class you can take instead of writing like short papers and doing a research paper is you can volunteer at this uh, military-run boarding school called Sunburst that helps adolescents who have made some mistakes turn their lives around. And apparently, I'm reading effectively not a Bible study, but how it's laid out is you come in and someone preaches a sermon, and then my job is to lead a discussion on the sermon, but also just debriefing about life and trying to do life together.
Good.
And the they're aged 16 to 18, and I I said me?
How are
I'm
you? Are you 19 yet?
no. No, I feel like terribly um like underprepared, and so um um but anyway, just like one of the things he said, because someone asked, is there anything you would tell us not to do? And the one thing he said was, don't look like a know-it-all. Um,
Good advice.
and yeah, like the mindset I'm going into it with is like I'm here to build relationship with people,
Yeah.
not to be a bestower of knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, I think that ties into to Peterson is a lot of it is grounded in the relationship, even though it is more knowledge based. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's a bit of my life that I just discovered today.
Well, good. Good. Well, I'm happy for you, Richard. I'm happy you're at school, and sounds like you're sounds like things are going well, even if you did have some B grades for that first semester. So
Jacob said he'll ban me for a year if I get a C this semester.
His mom is gonna get mad at me if he's spending his time on my just chatting streams instead of reading Augustine or whatever other bad theology they're making him read.
oh,
Oh,
oh.
you want to talk bad theology? Read Ovid. Oh my goodness, that book is wild. Oh my
I just remember when I was in college, I was taking Hebrew, and I told my roommate, who was a religious Catholic, that there's no present tense of the verb to be in Hebrew. And he said to me, "There can't be." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure it can be." And he's like, "No, no, no. I just read a page in Augustine where he's going on at length about why it's I am who am, and not I will be who I will be or I was who I was."
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's his problem. And he showed it to me. And that was the first time I'd read anything by Augustine. And that convinced me he's a fool.
Oh, fool no less. All right. On that fine note, I
Yeah,
am going to hit the hay.
me
Good
So,
too.
night.
good night, everyone.
Good night, Jacob. Good night, Paul.
Okay, if somebody else wants to jump on, they can. I will be taking a tiny break and then probably ending the thing. So, you guys watch Happy, and if nobody's in the queue when I get back, I'm just gonna end Okay, there are 6 people watching. Even if somebody jumps on soon, I'm just gonna go to bed. Like I should go to bed. watching him.